Today, we're going to learn how to do a bacteriophage experiment, and we're going to be getting a titer. A titer means the count of bacteriophage. Remember from the reading that bacteriophage are viruses that infect bacteria. So what's going to happen is, as the viruses infect the bacteria, they're going to leave holes where they kill the bacteria called plaques. And that will help us count the number of bacteriophage. Now, our original sample of bacteriophage is too concentrated. Too many phage, they would just kill all the bacteria on the plate. So what we have to do is we have to dilute them. And by diluting them, we will get to a concentration that is adequate for us to count them. So the first thing we're going to do is make our dilution series. And if we look at these test tubes, in this test tube, there is 1/10 of a milliliter of bacteriophage. And that's all we need for the entire experiment. In this flask, we have sterile saline. And so I'm going to go ahead and pipette sterile saline into each one of these tubes. This first tube with the bacteriophage in it already, and it's so little you can hardly see it, it's just a tiny drop. I'm going to add 9.9 milliliters of saline, and the rest I'm going to add 9 milliliters to. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to use aseptic technique, and we've talked about how to use pipettes before. So there's 9.9 milliliters, and I'm going to add that to my first test tube. Remember that this bulb has to be depressed here for it to work. And now I'm going to add 9 milliliters of sterile saline to the rest. So here is 9 milliliters. And that will go in tube number 2. And I'm going to be careful not to touch the tip of my pipette to anything to keep it sterile. And here I have tube number 3. I'll get 9 milliliters. I'll pipette that into tube number 3. And another 9 milliliters. And this is why it's called a serial dilution, because you do the same thing over and over again. This is going to go into tube number 4. And another 9 milliliters into tube number 5. And normally you would be doing this with a partner, but my partner there, he's running the camera, so thank you to Zeke Patterson.
I'm waving, but you can't see me.
And then 9 milliliters into tube number 6. And we are almost done. do 9 milliliters into tube number 7. And 9 milliliters into our last tube. So now we have sterile saline in all of these tubes, except with the first one. It has sterile saline plus bacteriophage. So we're ready to do our serial dilution. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this tube up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. This is my tube with the 1 milliliter, the 0.1 milliliter of bacteriophage. I'm going to go ahead and vortex that up. I'm going to turn this vortex down a little bit. Vortex that up. And I'm going to take 1 milliliter from this and put it into my tube number 2. So what I've done now is I've made this tube more dilute. And this is why it's called a serial dilution, because I'm going to do the same thing over and over again. I'm going to vortex this tube up. I'm going to take 1 milliliter from tube number 2 and put it into tube number 3. And I'm going to vortex tube number 3. And I'm going to take 1 milliliter from tube number 3 and put it into tube number 4. And as you might guess, vortex tube number 4 up. I'm going to take 1 milliliter from tube number 4, put it into tube number 5, going to mix this tube up, take 1 milliliter from tube number 5, put it into tube number 6. And we are finally almost done with this part. Vortex this up. And 1 milliliter from 6 and put it into 7. And vortex that up. And discard our pipette. Now, we have successfully diluted our phage. So tube 1 is the most concentrated, and tube 7 will be the least concentrated. When these phage are plated, remember that they need a host. They can't live on their own. So just having these tubes of bacteriophage are useless. We have to give them a host cell to live in. The host that they will grow in is E. coli, and it's a special strain called E. coli B. And so I have a tube here of bacteria. This is the host cell for the organisms. So I'm going to go ahead and vortex that tube up. This is a 24-hour culture. It's been growing for 24 hours, which means it's actively growing. And because the cells are actively growing, these bacteriophage should easily be able to get in and infect these host cells. So the next thing I'm going to do is get some tubes ready with the E. coli so that the bacteriophage will have host cells. I have 7 tubes already labeled, and each one of them is going to get 0.3 milliliters of E. coli. So I'm going to go ahead and pipette 0.3 milliliters of E. coli into each one of those tubes. And I will just do that now. Little tiny pipettes. So, with these little pipettes, you need to be very careful that you don't clog them. Here is 0.3 milliliters, and we're going to put that in one of the test tubes. I'm going to cap that off, and we'll repeat the process. 0.3 milliliters is not a lot. If you look in the test tube, you can hardly see anything in there. So we'll do another 0.3. And put that in the test tube. And another 0.3. And we'll put that in the test tube. Okay. All right, so we're going to put that in this test tube. That up, and we'll make sure we have our foam on. Take 0.3 mils, put it in the next tube, all right, so we have 3 more tubes to go. We'll take 0.3 milliliters, put it in tube. That's tube number 4. We'll take another 0.3 milliliters. That was tube number 5. Discounted. There's tube number 6. And finally, we have our tube number 7. Bacteria. So now we have our tubes of E. coli ready, and they are our host organisms for our bacteriophage. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my bacteriophage to my bacteria. Except for the first tube, we need a control. And if you remember what a control is, it's to make sure the experiment is working. So for the first tube, I'm not going to add any bacteriophage. I'm just going to add sterile saline. And I'm going to add 1/10 of a milliliter of sterile saline. So I will fill this up 1/10 of a milliliter. And recap the tube. I'll return the rest of my sterile saline to the solution. So that will act as a control. Now we're going to take tube 2, I'm going to vortex it, and I'm going to take 1/10 of a milliliter from tube 2 and put it into my bacteriophage, or my bacteria tube 2. Notice that I can use the same pipette for this. And I'm going to return the excess to tube 2. I'm going to take 1/10 of a milliliter from tube 3 and put it into my bacteria tube 3. Vortex. Take 1/10 of a milliliter. And return the excess. Tube 4, vortex. Take 1/10 of a milliliter from tube bacteriophage number 4 and put it into tube with E. coli number 4. One-tenth of a milliliter. Tube 5 with bacteriophage into tube 5 of E. coli. Tube 6 of bacteriophage. Into tube 6 of E. coli. And tube 7 of bacteriophage into tube 7 of E. coli. All right. So now we have our 7 tubes of bacteria serving as a host. Remember, the first one is a control with no actual bacteriophage in it, whereas tubes 2 through 6 each have dilutions of bacteriophage. We're going to do something called the absorption phase, where we're going to let this sit for 10 minutes while the bacteria is being infected by the phage, and we'll come back after the 10-minute countdown. So now I have a plate of agar, and I have a tube of something called soft agar. This is half the consistency, half the thickness of regular agar, so that the bacteriophage will be able to diffuse through it. But it's solid enough to keep the cells from moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of tube 1 and I'm going to use a sterile transfer pipette. I'm going to transfer all of tube 1 into my sterile broth. And I'm going to mix it up and down a couple times to agitate it. And now I will pour the entire tube into plate 1. Recap it, give it a gentle swirl to cover the entire surface. And return it to the incubator and get plate 2. You have to keep these plates warm, which is why I'm doing them one at a time. I will repeat the process with the next tube. Tube 2 of bacteria. Soft agar, plate 2. I will use a pipette. Transfer the entire tube. Mix it into the agar. Use the pipette to suck it up and down to agitate it. Dispose the pipette and pour the entire tube into the agar. Recap it, give it a gentle swirl so that it covers the entire plate. And put it in the incubator and get the next plate. Plate 3, tube 3, tube of soft agar. Sterile pipette. Take all of tube 3, put it into the soft agar, use the pipette to mix it, and pour all of it into the plate. The cap, give it a swirl so that it covers the entire surface. And move on to plate 4. Plate 4, tube 4, soft agar 4, pipette 4. Take the pipette, all of tube 4. Mix into the soft agar, mix up and down, and pour into plate 4. Give it a swirl, make sure it covers the entire surface, and take it to the incubator. The reason you have to work quickly and do this one at a time is if you took them out in advance, the agar would harden before you're ready for it. Tube 5, soft agar, plate 5. And so you have to keep it in the warm water so it stays liquid. And you have to keep the plates warm so the agar doesn't solidify as soon as it touches them. Tube 5, mix. And pour. Swirl. There we go. Moving on to plate 6. Plate 6, tube 6, soft agar 6, pipette 6. All of tube 6. Into all of soft agar 6. Mix. And pour. And swirl so it covers the entire surface. And onto our last plate. Tube 7, soft agar 7, pipette 7, and plate 7. And our last one, all of tube 7. Into the agar. Mix. And pour. And swirl so it covers the entire surface. After those solidify, I will invert them and we'll let them incubate, and then when we come back and look at the results, we should see plaques. Take care, and we'll see the results in a future episode.